There is nothing I love more than watching a Fox propagandist get shut down on their own show. But of all of the Fox propagandists, there's something about Will Cain. It might be that he is just so incredibly bad at his job that it seems like Democrats take extra pleasure in going on that makes me so happy to watch him get so thoroughly shut down. And that is exactly what happened with Congressman Jason Crow, who ripped apart the very flimsy legal argument Will Cain was trying to make on behalf of Donald Trump's assault on our Constitution as he tries to launch a war with Iran. And I want to take a look at how he just left him silent. Jason Crow crushed it right here.
I do want to ask you why you're so upset. Why are Democrats so upset? It seems something incredible has been accomplished. We have set back Iran's nuclear capabilities. We can debate, and we'll wait for intel on whether or not that's months, years, or obliterated. We have accomplished something that several presidents have said they wanted to accomplish, which was to stop this nuclear program. We've done so as well while accomplishing peace between Israel and Iran, and I'm having trouble figuring out why every Democrat seems to be so upset about this remarkable success.
Yeah, well, we don't know, Will, what, if anything, we've accomplished because there haven't been briefings. There was supposed to be a briefing yesterday to all of Congress that's been postponed. So hopefully we'll get more answers on Friday. But listen, there is bipartisan support throughout the country, throughout the places where I'm from, working class places, rural places, places in the Midwest, places in the West. People just don't want the United States to be pulled into another Middle East conflict. Right? People can't afford groceries, they can't afford homes, our infrastructure is crumbling. We spent $3 trillion on Iraq and Afghanistan, 6,000 troops died. It's not unreasonable to say we deserve answers. We want to know the plan, we want to know the end game, we want to know the goal, and what is it you are trying to achieve other than just a one-time airstrike against these facilities, because we know that one airstrike or a series of airstrikes will not solve this ultimately, which is why I was actually glad to hear that, in your last segment that Donald Trump says they're going to talk to Iran. That actually is where we need to be again, because diplomacy is what will ultimately solve this.
I guess what I'm suggesting, Congressman, is you should be glad. You should be glad at much more of the outcome of this remarkable military excursion, this remarkable military achievement. And I know you served in our military. We've had that conversation before, and I salute your service and appreciate your service. But all the questions you ask, I actually agree with. I think that's a wonderful conversation to have before this took place. What is our goal? Was our goal accomplished? Do we want to get engulfed in yet another conflict in the Middle East? But you know who else agrees with that? Not just you, not just me, and not just everybody watching, but President Donald Trump. He's made that very clear. He has no interest in a prolonged war in the Middle East, not in Iran or anywhere else. And so for you to be asking those questions now makes me wonder, as you've brought up constitutionality, you've brought up congressional notification. And I wonder what you mean when you start tweeting about time to reclaim war powers back from the President of the United States.
Yeah, it's a really great question. And listen, I applaud our airmen and airwomen who did this mission, right? And I can have problems with the mission itself, but the fact that it went off so well and it was executed, sure, I always support our service members and we should applaud that, but let's not confuse that with the actual debate. I went to war 3 times for this country in Iraq and Afghanistan. And we spent, like I said a minute ago, we spent $3 trillion in those wars. They ended poorly by most measures. So, when people talk tough in this town, when politicians pound their chest and saber rattle, it's some young man or woman in a working class community, people that I grew up with, kids like me that have to go off and do the work. So
that's
I think
really
it's
quickly,
Congressman,
but that's all very fair. That's really fair. And again, you're not going to find a lot of disagreement on that. But I'm trying to figure out why you're applying it to this particular issue. There's no call to invade Iran. There's no call from this president to get involved in another prolonged war in the Middle East.
Yep. And here's why. The president, any president, has the authority to defend America under Article 2 of the Constitution. Undoubtedly. Every president has actually used that authority. But there has to be an imminent risk against Americans or U.S. facilities. I have seen nothing in the last year that shows an imminent risk, which means you have to come to Congress. And why that's important is the reason I talked about before. We spent 20 years in war and wasted trillions of dollars because we stopped having the debate. It is so wrong. And by the way, the Republicans and Democrats did this. There were Republican administrations, there were Democratic administrations. Republicans controlled Congress, Democrats controlled Congress. There was literally one vote over 20 years to send America to that war for 20 years. So I think it's really important for Congress to get involved again and say, you know what, not on our watch, not anymore. No more blank checks. If Americans are going to be asked to pay for this, if Americans are going to be asked to do the fighting and the dying, then we need to have a public conversation about it.
Let's indulge that for just a moment, because I do think it's a little bit off base in that we're not talking about going to war in Iran. President Trump is not asking for a prolonged war in the Middle East, and we have to hammer that point home again and again together here, Congressman. But I do appreciate your bipartisan criticism, because I would look for inconsistency, as I did last time when we talked, because President Obama dropped untold number of bombs on countries that were not covered by the AUMF. Syria, Somalia, Yemen, thousands upon thousands of bombs that were not congressionally approved. So did Bill Clinton in Kosovo and Bosnia. So we have seen this from every administration. So I require criticism to be consistent when it comes to this application of the War Powers Act. That being said, Congressman,
it was wrong then and it's wrong now.
I heard you, and I appreciate that. That being said, the War Powers Act in and of itself, the constitutionality is not clear, and the president, the commander-in-chief, under Article 2, needs to have broad leeway and power to do what he can do to preserve America's interests. And I think that's what we've seen here. Not a declaration of war, not a prolonged invasion, but simply a bombing, as we've seen in the past, to ensure that Iran does not have nuclear capabilities.
But Will, we haven't seen that. We don't even know what we've seen. There's been no briefing to Congress. There's been no basic information. There's been no debate. There have been no votes. There's been nothing. So you know, when you
the
say
president did send a letter on Monday to satisfy the War Powers Act. Congress was informed on Monday satisfying the War Powers Act.
All it was that letter, by the way, have your viewers Google it, have them look it up. Literally a 2-paragraph letter that just recites the legal authorities. That's all it says.
Well, I'm sure you would like more information, but that satisfies the constitutionality of the action under the War Powers Act. And what I would say, Congressman, is this. You also have to consider the national security threat. Telling you might be one thing. Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett saying that she's the one that should decide, and that information, and you can appreciate operational security, that information going to someone so active on TikTok with that level of irresponsibility is a whole nother issue here when it comes to the commander-in-chief doing what's best for the United States of America.
Yeah, Will, by the way, this is not what I would like. You said this is what I would like, more information, like a document, a one-page document that just recites legal authorities and constitutional provisions actually doesn't give us the facts that Congress needs. This isn't what I want. This isn't what I would like. This literally is my constitutional obligation. I'm a member of Congress, and the Constitution says that it's Congress that has to authorize use of military force if there's not a self-defense need. So what I need is information. I need specific information that shows, was there an imminent threat? We haven't received that yet.
The question of whether or not you have a constitutional right, Congressman, is whether or not this action satisfied either imminent threat or protection of American interests. That gives the president those powers.
And it's my obligation to determine whether that's true. And as a member of the Intelligence Committee and the Armed Services Committee, I have seen no information in the last year that would indicate that's true. If the administration has it, then they need to produce it to everybody, to Democrats, to Republicans. They need to produce it to Congress, because it is Congress's role to conduct oversight and apply the facts to the law and to the Constitution to say whether or not this was authorized or not.
He's a moron. He's not good at what he does. And he's, of course, not the only Fox host who's pretty bad at their job. We saw a lot of the slander today out of Fox was unsurprisingly not directed at congressional Democrats, usually where they set their sights. It was directed at a new Democratic candidate, the winner of the New York City primary, someone, if you've been watching the show, you know I love, that is Zohran Mamdani. And Laura Ingraham had some words for the soon-to-be mayor, and I want to respond to all of them.
So unless rich New Yorkers band together, donate a lot of money, and create a groundswell for a viable alternative to Mamdani, another great American city is going to swirl down the drain. And when it does, the rest of us should not be on the hook to bail it out. This is their decision. This is their choice.
Republicans really don't like getting bad election results, do they? They kind of freak out. We got to get all the billionaires. Let's think about this. Fox, the Fox propaganda outlet, and really the MAGA movement as a whole, they claim, although Fox is the biggest cable outlet, by the way, that they are anti-establishment. They're fighting back, right? That MAGA thinks they're counterculture. Ridiculous. But Laura Ingram's response to an overwhelming people-powered movement in the form of Zoran's campaign is that we got to get all the rich people together. Let's track down some bags of cash and throw them at this situation. Who do we know who's well connected that can stop this man who has harnessed the power of the people in the greatest city in the world? What are we going to do? So first of all, that's hypocritical and ridiculous. Second, I have heard, and I'm glad I addressed it when I had my interview with Zoran, all the misinformation and ridiculous talking points around his campaign. First of all, Fox slandering this man and attacking him for wanting free baby baskets for newborns. The pro-family party, you're telling on yourself with that one. And I love how little, I don't want to use the word research because I feel like that's a term of the right, but how little understanding they have of who Zoran is. You know, we saw Eric Adams today say, oh, he's never accomplished anything. How is he going to get, fast and free buses? Well, he won that pilot program for his district while he was an assembly member. And it's been incredibly successful. So maybe you should look at some of these policy outcomes. And this attack on the city-owned grocery stores that people have such a big problem with, why? Zoran's plan explicitly states that the money in the budget will be coming from a program that pays twice as much as his city-owned grocery store pilot, one grocery store in all 5 boroughs. It is half as much, $60 million. And the program that existed before gave subsidies to corporations to do what? Nothing. They didn't have to accept SNAP. They didn't have to produce fresher produce. They didn't have to abide by anything. It was the government giving away money. And boy, we do that a lot to big corporations, don't we? Elon never wanted to go after that waste, fraud, and abuse, did he, huh? With no strings attached. And Zoran says, let's try something different. Let's try something better. And for anyone who has a gripe with that program, you should be thrilled. He'll do a pilot in food deserts in New York to make sure that people can eat, which I don't know, it seems like something we'd want to do. And if it doesn't work out, you should love that because you'll have your justification for your absurd position. Zoran Mamdani built a campaign, again, that was people-powered in the greatest sense of the word. The takeaway from many will unfortunately be that this was a triumph of social media. Sure, Zoran had an incredible social media campaign. His comms team, top of the line. The content they produced, if you scroll through his Instagram, you will think is a Hollywood movie. But what was more important than the quality of his camera was the quality of his message. A message he stayed on relentlessly, no matter what. And a message he didn't change no matter how the polls looked. It was about a week out from the election that Zoran once again shared the story of my former classmate, Mahmoud Khalil, someone who Donald Trump made a punching bag of free speech rights, by the way, which Republicans claim to care about. And maybe that is an issue, that is a person who is standing up for what he believes in, that maybe even some Democrats might not fully fall in line with. Zoran, at the end of his campaign, as things got closer than ever, did not think about, oh, I got to move to the center. I got to move to the center. Maybe we got to subdue this rhetoric. Talking about free speech and freedom, that sounds American to me. He said none of that. Zoran ran the campaign that Zoran wanted to run, the whole campaign. So Democrats, when you try to find what you're going to take away from this, don't think that it's posting more. Sure, posting more is important, but it is authenticity. It is authenticity, if I could speak correctly. I authentically screwed that word up. And a real message about what people care about, and that is making their work dignified by making this country affordable. That's your takeaway from the best campaign I have ever seen. I am so incredibly excited about Mayor Mamdani. I'm so incredibly proud that I got to interview him a little bit earlier than most people were getting on board his campaign, by the way. I don't need to say that, but I'm gonna. Democrats, take note. This is what a fighter looks like. Zoran Mamdani is what a fighter looks like. It's just the truth. And we're going to be covering him every single day on this show. And if you want to support that, as always, you can hit that subscribe button, leave a like on this video, and if you stuck around to the end, you can drop a blue heart in the comments. And until next time, I'll see you soon.